Former President Thabo Mbeki has launched Volume 1 of the ANC Today Letters book, which covers the period 2000 to 2004. This book features letters the former president wrote to ANC members during his tenure, discussing social issues and driving public debate. At the launch of his book, ANC Today Letters, Volume 1, Mbeki delved into the challenges he faced while in office. The launch was attended by Mothobi, Mutloatse, and of the Skotaville Academic Publishing, that's the book's publisher, and Professor Sifiso Mxolisi Ndlovu, the editor, who played a very vital and crucial role in bringing this literary work to life. Well, we're lucky enough to have Professor Ndlovu in studio with us today. Prof, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
And thank you for inviting me to the studio.
So if we had to look at this book, I mean, we've sort of known that the president has written letters for many, many years and started doing so in 2001. How would you describe this particular book, though?
We'll describe it as sort of a democratic process, in the sense that he wanted to inform the public about what is going on in his office. As you know, that he was the president of the governing party. And if you remember very well, that role really had to make it a point that he takes the message to the people via newspapers. But if you remember very well, the newspapers of the world, including the SABC itself, I think the SABC would have said that, no, we're not stooges of the government, so we're not going to pass this message on his behalf, because our competitors and everybody else are going to blame us and say, now we are lackeys of the ruling party. And if you remember very well, the newspapers of the day were not necessarily interested. So whatever interview they had with him about AIDS, for example, you find out that the journalist at the end of the day wants to also put his or her point across. And then the message that President Mbeki is trying to project will be buried, you know, within the story.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a love and hate relationship, you know.
That led to him deciding
that,
I'm going to write my own letters and not
so
let
that the public
edit it. So, you know, when we look at days gone by, I mean, when in 2001, I mean, let me fast forward to today, because we know that President Ramaphosa does a very similar thing. He writes a letter every single week and he publishes it on Facebook, on X, on whatever platforms. I received it now on Instagram. So, on Instagram, on WhatsApp. So it was much easier to get that out very quickly. But for the president, where would he publish it? Did it go up onto the government's website? Would it go onto... how did he get this out?
Let me say to you, the ANC itself, in terms of media history, in fact, you cannot understand the history of the media in South Africa without also including the liberation movement. If you think about it, the first official ANC newspaper is founded in 1912. It's called Abantu Bat. It was set up by Pixley Ka Isakasem. And before that, the ANC president, that is John Libalele Dube, founded the newspaper Ilanga, that's in Natal, in 1903. Actually still exists even today. So by the time the ANC president establishes a paper in the year 2001 called ANC Today, that's probably the 7th or 8th newspaper that has been established by this organization. And remember, in terms of broadcasting, they had a radio freedom. So to some extent, he knew, because remember, whilst the ANC was in exile, he was one of the leaders of the Department of Information and Publicity. And they had about 6 or so newspapers. One of them is Sichaba, Maibuye, Vow, that is the voice of the women. So by that time, he establishes this newspaper, which is an electronic newspaper now, because the internet, it's probably the 7th and 8th, so he uses the electronic space because the internet now has come in.
Absolutely, and the spread, it's so wide, but that's why it's so nice to go back and get these letters. And I know, as you say, that this is just the first of, is it 2 or 3 volumes coming out?
It's 2 volumes.
So it'll be 2 volumes.
Yeah,
so this is the first between 2001, 2004.
Yes.
But obviously he carried on doing this until 2007, close to where his term came to an end.
Yes, yes.
He carried on writing, though. I mean, it's not like he's finished writing. In fact, I think I just saw one of his writings coming out quite recently. That's one thing about former President Thabo Mbeki is his writings. And I think that's one of the points that we always look to him. He is a phenomenal writer. And I mean, when you used to listen to his speeches, when you would read these writings, he knew how to put his thoughts down on words in the most beautiful and creative way.
Yes, because it also tells us that as South Africans, writing and reading is crucial for us.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be slaves of the new technologies. You know, so we should go back to the 3 R's, you know, and make it a point that also our kids inherit that. I mean, as we are saying, at his age, he continues to do likewise. And we need to really promote those cultural traditions.
Indeed.
within.
I was reading the article that was published, I think it was in one of the newspapers, perhaps the City Press, and they were saying, I don't know who said that, perhaps it was you who said this, that he should be the man who pens a lot of the biographies of some of the leaders on the continent, because nobody can capture it better than former President Mbeki.
It was Mothobi, Mutloatse.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, so the publisher can say that one.
He's allowed to say that.
Yes, he's allowed. But remember, Mothobi is also a cultural activist. Then you'll understand why he says that. But at the same time, he's the publisher.
Yeah.
He makes money through.
but it is just another big accolade to his writing and his ability to speak to African events and the history of Africa and a lot of it. I mean, I think that the knowledge in the former president's mind is amazing. Let's go to these letters, though. We're covering, 2001 to 2004. Perhaps you want to give us a glimpse into some of the letters that are in there and the feeling within the country at that time.
I think some of the letters, for example, take the issue of women and the question of leadership. So they are organized in such a way that he really castigates us, including the country itself, including his own movement, that we are not doing much in terms of promoting females as leaders. I mean, they are always deputies. Even now, they're still deputies. So for me, it might be a call that, the time has arrived for us to have a female president of the country. He does the same thing in terms of the youth itself. And it calls for the youth to play a prominent role. Remember, for the first time in our lives, after 1994, we dedicate a month to the youth, that is June. We also have a Women's Month. So it seems to me he's really interested in making it a point that we have a functioning state, because prior to 1994, women were not really given space in terms of the leadership by the Nationalist Party. We know what happened in June 1976, where the youth were sort of destroyed and killed by the ruling party. So in a sense, he's saying that in some of the letters, yes, we might have achieved much after 1994, but we still have to do more. And also, he touches on the issue about internal dynamics within his own organization, issues of corruption, an issue that some of the people who are operating within the ANC are not necessarily committed members of the movement. They are there to make it a point that they make money and don't understand that really the ANC is governing on behalf of the people in terms of what the Freedom Charter says, that is, the people shall govern. And also he doesn't focus himself. Actually, the themes are divided into 4 or 5 basically. Focuses on the geopolitics of the world. I mean, there's a letter where he pays homage to Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
If you read that letter, you might think that he was aware what was going to happen in the future.
Indeed.
So,
one can imagine, and it's good to look at it because it does take you back into the years of, you know, the historical and global events that were happening. I mean, I imagine 9/11 was also something that
there's a letter on about that too.
I'm sure. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy to see the letters included. But, you know, these events, the events that happen within the ANC, personal events as well. He also delves, and I like his honesty, and where he spoke at the event very much so about what it was like for him to come in. And when he first took over the role as the deputy president of the country, there was no formal handover. There was, you know, they were starting out fresh, looking at something and thinking, okay, well, I'm going to walk into an office, and he'd go into his office and there'd be like a basic desk and chair, and he was now the deputy president of a country with no real sort of like, here are your books, read them, this is how you take over, and this is what you've got to do. Start afresh. I mean, you know, people don't necessarily think of that side.
Can I put this back to you?
Yeah.
This analogy.
Yeah.
You know, one of the works that are publications that I did in a book called Guerrilla Radios was a chapter on Radio RSA.
Yes.
Radio RSA was created by the apartheid regime to make it a point that it challenges radio freedom, and it broadcasted throughout the world promoting apartheid propaganda and racism, and making it a point that it gives a counter narrative that is against the ANC and other liberation movements as terrorists. Okay, that is fine. It had to do that because that was the governing party then. But think about it. When the new democratic government took power in 1994, the SABC had to change. When you arrive at the studio, you cannot inherit what was done by those who were controlling the SABC before you came in.
Yeah.
You're going to have an empty studio. You have to think about it. You're not going to call the powers that may be there, the governing party, as terrorists, because in your notebook, they are just terrorists. You're not going to call Africans, you know, as tribes. So there's a lot that you have to change after 1994. You know, what I find surprising is that as the SABC, in that respect, even though we know you are funded by the government, but you claim you are independent, it doesn't matter. It's neither here or there. But there are so many changes that we don't appreciate.
Yeah.
You know, people keep on calling you names, but if you think about it, it no longer feels like it was prior to 1994, you know, where you had all the radio bantus, you know, operating according to the homeland system and also propagating the Bantustan system and supporting the so-called chief ministers. But post-1994, the ball game had changed for the SABC.
Absolutely.
So that is what the president is saying, that he had to inherit an empty room because he cannot carry on and implement the policies of F.W. de Klerk. Think about it all over the world, whether the Conservative Party or the Labour Party in Britain. When you take over from the Conservative Party, surely as a shadow minister, someone who was in power before you will come and brief you because you have the same constitution, even though Britain doesn't have a constitution, but they'll tell you what was happening and whatever. But come 1994, this doesn't happen.
Not at
because
all.
you are starting afresh. It means you can't say that after 30 years, nothing has been done. I mean, we've been oppressed for more than 350 years, and then in 30 years, you think that that oppression, that discrimination is over.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. So it's a journey that's
It's
still continuing.
A
It's
work in progress. And a work in progress we can be proud of. And I think that these are perhaps letters we need to look. And as the former president said himself, don't just read them, engage with them. Read them, listen to them, and understand them. So it's a pleasure having you here. Thank you. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into it and talking to us, because what we are focusing in on is the 30 years of democracy in this country, and this forms a massive part of it. So if it is something that you're interested in reading, these letters, going back into the archives, it's the first of 2 volumes that'll be coming out, and Professor Sifiso Mxolisi Ndlovu is the editor of this. So we're looking forward to the release of volume 2, but for now we have volume 1, and it's available all over the place, so you can go and get a copy. The ANC Today Letters book, unpacking former President Thabo Mbeki's book. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in studio.